evening, everybody. Uh, this is so we are starting. Sarmad is here. Sarmad Hussain is an international expert in universal acceptance and in IDN. And we all are fortunate that he has agreed to be with us in today's seminar. And he is a real resource because I am attending several workshops as a chair, as a co-chair, as a participant in various ICANN meetings, and everybody in the workshop looks at Sarmad to get the expert guidance whenever we stuck up, not only to stuck up, even to get the basic understanding in that. So this is fortunate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why this particular session? We all know that hardly 15% of us are English speaking. The rest of us are either illiterate, few of us, but people only communicate in their local languages, and we have huge amount of local languages. 22 languages are actually recognized by Government of India, but we have more than 2,000 languages and dialect through which we work. And it is said that after every 100 kilometer, there is a change in the language and the dialect through which the people communicate. Now, if we do not include that population in the internet, then actually implementation of internet will not be complete, because all other people are consuming internet only for downloading the movies or songs. That is not actual use of internet. That is not actual sharing of information and the knowledge, which is the basic aspect of this particular beautiful technology. It is great that Sarmad is here to discuss with us, and we'll be very happy to know each and everything. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll also request you, in case you have any queries and questions for this. Now, fortunately, in today's session, we have the chair of UASG, Dr. Ajay Data, with us. So we will also take input from him, what is expectation at the international level. And we have Sarika Guliani from the industry representative, who is basically driving the language implementation in the internet in India. So I request first Dr. Ajay Data to give the opening remarks, and as we said that opening remarks and everything, we will try to keep it as short as possible. Doctor, over to Dr. Ajay Data.
Thank you very much, sir. And I must congratulate Nixi and especially you for taking this UA webinar in India and taking this leadership into making this awareness program. It's my honor and privilege to chair this entire initiative globally with around 650 members. And what better position India could have to make this awareness program about universal acceptance in India. India is a very apt place for universal acceptance, if I can say that. Anilji, you yourself is leading this 22 top level domain names of different languages. We are having approximately 19,000 plus dialects in India. Almost 120 languages gets spoken and 22 are recognized as official. We are a diverse country for language, and these top level domain names in 22 languages are going to bring next billion people online. We all know that. Universal acceptance, our director Sarmad Hussain is going to talk about the introduction, the thing, and about the technical part of it. Let me take 1 minute to tell what UASG is all about. This group identified a problem that all domain names and all email addresses are not accepted equally over the internet, which very simply means that if internet is broken, which means if I have a domain name, it may not take me to the correct website, my email may not reach, And this kind of problem is not accepted to some community members. They got together and thought that this is an initiative required in the World Wide Web, where all the domain names and all emitters are accepted equally, and how to solve them technically, how to make aware every end user, every business owner, every technocrat, every student and academia that this is a problem to be solved. So UASG got formed in 2015, and then myself became the chair in 2019. And then if you can see, this initiative sees a very important aspect. We started understanding what are the pain areas, how do we function in the country, and we started creating working groups. So we have a technology working group, measurement working group, local initiative working group, we have ambassadors working group, we have EAI working group, communication working group. We created the team. Worldwide people are leading those initiatives. And we have, Anilji, you are aware, Nixi is taking, your team is taking a very active part into this entire initiative. And this makes it very, very powerful, because the world is trying to solve this problem together. And India is a perfect place to discuss more and more and more about universal acceptance. So in this webinar, it's very important. Sarmad is going to speak about entire UA and also the importance of UA and what are the steps which UA will require to solve some of the problems which we might face during accessing internet, and how do we all together bring billions of people online. With this opportunity, thank you, Anilji, for inviting me for speaking and sharing my thoughts around UA. And it's my pleasure to be part of this. Over to you back, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ajay. And we know that you and your team is working day and night to see that universal acceptance become a reality, and more people come in the fold of internet and its use and spread of local languages also. So this is very important. Now I'll request Sarika, because she is leading from the industry FICCI, and I request Sarika to please tell again in 2 minutes, again my request, as Ajay has said, to the all audience before we hand over to Sarmad, because we don't want to lose a single minute of what Sarmad is going to talk to us. Sarika.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, and I'll try to be brief as possible. Very good afternoon to all of you. Like it has been already been mentioned by my previous speakers, Dr. Ajay Data and Mr. Jain, so I'll not be repetitive on the importance of the languages for a diverse country like India and the growth and the potential it carries on if we continue to work in the area of multilingual Indic internet. But when we talk about like from FICCI's side, we started this initiative, something called FICCI Indian Language Internet Alliance. And that was like a chamber body taking up this work to work across languages, especially the 22 official languages, and to work in this domain across with different stakeholders, be it the technical, academia, industry, of course, and the government. So while we were working on this, one of the fundamental things which came up that universal acceptance is an integral pillar of the really truly multilingual inclusive internet. Until the time we have that as part of our campaign, we cannot achieve the desired goal. Keeping that in mind, we started with a local initiative, a UA chapter, I would say by the end of 2019, or I would say more prominently during 2020. I mean, back in 1.5 years, what we have been able to see and learn with our experiences and also work in the areas. So from the community, so it's a whole community which is getting built up, which includes professionals, technical people, industry, government, and all those. And that community is growing. And what community does is we all work together on the various areas of a UA, which includes the awareness generation, technical workshops, seminars, I would say the consultations and the articles, authoring articles, and various other things. So the multiple of activities, which as a local initiative chapter, we have been able to take it with the support of the community and the other stakeholders, I would say. In fact, Nixi is one of them, our main partners, which we drive many things, ISOC and others. So there are a lot many which we can. So this whole concept, what we have been talking about, what Dr. Data mentioned and Mr. Jain mentioned, can only be driven when we have the support of the community and the members coming in together and actually realizing its benefit and spreading the same to others. So that's with the aim which FICCI is working on the UA initiative and driving the local initiative chapter. We see a lot of potential. There are multiple things which have been done at the central and the state level along with the different stakeholders, and there are multiple things which are being carried forward. There is a specific I would say the information available on the India local initiatives on the UA as part of the FICCI website. There's a web page. You can visit that. We request you also to join the community, and also you will have an access to the resources of UASG.tech, which I'm sure Mr. Samad Hussain will talk further deeper into it, but you will have an access to the resources. So that will help you all to join the community. We believe this is the another revolution which is going to help us out to really realize the potential of the internet, which is now indispensable for our lives. With this, thank you.
Thank you, Sarika, for sweet and memorable message to all of us. And I know that you are not only working from the center, but you are also coordinating with various state governments, various groups who are representing various languages, and you are supporting them also in digitizing their things, in ensuring that they are able to participate well in that and also things. And all the best, Sarika. And you know that whenever you invite us, whenever you feel that Nixi is of any help to you, we are always with you. You don't have to invite us. We are always with you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are not coming in between you and Sarmat. I am really honored, as I said, that Mr. Sarmat Hussain is with us, and he is a international faculty expert, knowledgeable person, and I think he is taken as the ultimate in IDN and this. So Sarmat, over to you. Rajiv from Nixi will move the slides.
Thank you, Anilji, and thank you, Nixi, for providing me the opportunity to speak on this topic. We'll be talking about universal acceptance and the role of ccTLDs in achieving universal acceptance. I am engaged with the ICANN and associated with their IDN and UA program. So next slide, please. So as far as the overview of this presentation is concerned, will be the presentations largely divided into two parts. In the first part of the presentation, we'll be looking at what universal acceptance is and why it's needed and what are the current issues with the universal acceptance of domain names and email addresses. And then in the second part, we will look at what ccTLD manager like Nixi as an organization, what role it needs to play and it can play in achieving universal acceptance. Next slide, please. So when we talk about universal acceptance of domain names and email addresses, as Dr. Data also mentioned, the goal is simple, that all the different domain names and email addresses should work in all software applications. And that is, even though it's a simple goal, it has far-reaching consequences. For example, it is essential to provide consumer choice to end users. So for example, if there are two different top-level domains, one is accepted by technology and one is not accepted by technology, it represents an unfair competition. And finally, also that as we will see, there are some challenges, for example, in some applications accepting domain names or associated email addresses in local languages. And that if that does not work well, it obviously causes a significant barrier to access to the internet for local populations, which are obviously versant in only their local languages and scripts. So actually, even though it is a technically limited problem, it actually has far-reaching consequences as far as access to technology is concerned. Next slide, please. So when we say, that universal acceptance is that all applications are accepting all different domain names and email addresses, it's sort of the way we look at domain names and email addresses is that we actually categorize them in a few sets of domain names and few sets of internationalized email addresses. And in this screen, I'm actually sharing with you some of the types of these domain names and email addresses. Basically, as in around 2012-13, the community at ICANN worked with ICANN, and a new GTLD round was launched. So before the new GTLD round and before actually earlier as well, there was also work on country code top level domains in local languages. So originally they were more of the top level domains or the last part or suffix of a domain name like .com and .org. Normally those were 2 to 3 characters long. In some cases they were 4 characters long, but generally 2 to 3 characters long. And then this was a fixed set before, for example, 2009. Largely fixed set that there were about around 20, a little over 20 GTLDs, and then there were two-letter country codes like .in for India. And because of that, a lot of different software developers or technology developers, they would, to validate these properly, they would hard code this small set into their applications. However, since 2009 for country codes and since 2012 and 13, there have been now new top-level domains which are now available, under which you can actually register your names, domain names. So, for example, if you look at the 3 categories, you can have .sky, which was not available before. You had .com, .org, .net. But so there are these new top-level domains which are now coming in. They are sometimes longer than 3 or 4 letters, like .technology. And then you can actually have the entire domain name in a local language. And I've given an example of Devanagari script domain name here. You can also use these domain names to create email addresses of different types. And based on new standards, now it is possible to have so email address has actually 2 parts. It has a local part, what is normally referred to as a local part or a mailbox name, which is what is before the @ sign. And then you have the domain name part, which is after the @ sign. So now with these new standards for email addresses, it is possible to have the mailbox name or the local part before the @ sign in the local language in UTF-8 format, Unicode format. And then after the @ sign, you can also have a complete domain name in local languages. So it is now possible to have entire email addresses in local languages, which is great from an end user perspective because it provides access to so many more people. However, it also brings some challenges because many of the applications which have been around are generally trained to receive or anticipate email addresses purely in ASCII or what is normally referred to as English letters. But they are, when they see a new domain names or new email addresses which are in different scripts, they consider that maybe there's some issue with it and they invalidate it and do not accept it properly. So there are all these different kinds of domain names and email addresses which of course now need to be supported by applications, but the current reality of things, as I'll show in next couple of slides, is that these are not really accepted. Next slide, please. So we did and then obviously this is actually quite relevant to India, right? Because as you can see, in addition to .in as a ASCII suffix for domain names, India's also got 15 internationalized domain name top level domains in all the different scripts and languages which are used in India. And for if you would want your end users to use these domain names, the universal acceptance, your applications need to be universal acceptance ready. Otherwise, if you use a domain name in one of these scripts or an email address in one of these scripts and your applications are not ready, they will just consider those as invalid and reject them, even though they are valid in their own right. So this becomes obviously very relevant to to local population and local communities. Next slide, please. So when we say that all the applications should accept these different categories of domain names and email addresses, we're really talking about at least 5 different kinds of actions that they should be able to input or accept domain names and email addresses. They should be able to validate them properly. They should be able to process them. So for example, if there is a email address in Gujarati script, they should be able to use that, input it, and actually use it to send an email out. And they should be able to store such domain names and email addresses, all these applications, and the application should also be able to display them correctly. So there's different, obviously, details of processing, accepting domain names and email addresses when we talk of them in the context of UA readiness. Next slide, please. So I guess the question is, what is the extent of the problem? And under the guidance and leadership of Universal Acceptance Steering Group, we've actually been doing a series of studies, and this sort of summarizes the data from 3 different studies we did over last 4 years or so. So let me try to explain what this data is capturing. What we did was that we went to all these different websites globally, and many of the websites actually have a contact us page. So we would go to the contact us page, and when you normally submit a query on a contact us page, they would ask for an email address. And what we did was we in that email address bar, we submitted one of these different types of email addresses to check whether the website will accept that kind of email address. So we were only checking that whether it accepts it. We're not even testing that it can actually send an email out to that email address. So it's a very basic test, the most basic you can actually check. And when we did this test over 1,000 websites at a time in each of these studies, what we found out was that different categories of email addresses are accepted to a varying degree. So the new short like .sky example I shared with you earlier, generally it is now reasonably well accepted, about 98%. It's still not 100% like .com or .org, but it's still good enough. Obviously, it can be further improved. The new long like .technology or .engineering or .international, so these are longer top-level domains. If you form a email address using one of these domain names, what was found was that only about 85% of the website would accept such email addresses, and about 15% of the email website would say that this is not a valid email address in their view. And the reason potentially possibly is because maybe some of these websites, they have a check, put a check on the input domain name that the suffix or the top level domain part should be only 3 to 4 or 5 or 6 characters long. But when you get something like .engineering, which is much longer, they think it's just an invalid top level domain, and it's just old code which needs to be fixed. When you start mixing domain names, the email addresses, different languages in email addresses. So we tried it with Chinese and Arabic, for example. And if, so for example, if you have an email address which is entirely in Chinese, what we found out was that almost 90% of these websites, actually 89% of these websites, were just rejecting that email, saying that this email doesn't really seem valid to us, even though it was a valid and functional email address. So that's actually a big problem. And this problem is not just for Chinese, as I will show. This is a real local problem as well. So in 2020, what we did was, instead of looking at global websites, we started looking at local websites, meaning that we looked at it at a country level rather than globally. Next slide, please. And I'd like to share some results from what we got from India. So what we did was, we actually developed a Hindi email address as one of the examples, in addition to Arabic and Chinese. And we looked at we took about 50 websites which are popular in India, and we worked with some of you actually to get a list of these websites. We picked up these websites from 5 different categories. So there were some websites from media, some from academia, some government websites, some banking or financial sector websites. And I've just listed some of those websites. So we actually looked at about 50 of these websites. And we went to these websites and we gave a Hindi email address to them, and found out that of these about 50 odd websites, only 12% of them would actually accept an email address in Hindi. And all the other websites would actually reject that email address as invalid. And that obviously is sort of the extent of the problem, which you would also see locally in India. Next slide, please. And that's obviously something we would want to fix. In another study, so this study was just looking at websites, right? It was looking at how websites input such domain names and email addresses. We also wanted to find out, that suppose, I have an email address and I really want to actually use it to send an email out. What is the likely chance that that email is actually going to go through and, will be received on the other end? So we looked at this is an internal study we've done within ICANN recently. And we looked at all the different TLD zones we have. So we have, we're looking at around 1,200 top level domains, .com, .org, all the different GTLDs, generic top level domain, for which we have access to the zone files. And they have about 208 million second level domains registered in these GTLD zones. We actually went into the zones and looked up all the MX servers, MX server records. MX records are basically records within the zone file which identify the mail servers. So we actually found out about 34 million mail servers which were in these zone files, and found out that they use about 2 million independent or unique IP addresses. And so we actually got mail server addresses and their IP addresses from these zone files, and we wanted to check how many of these mail servers actually support basically an email address in a local language. So what we did was we actually went and sent we pinged all these email servers out there, and got a response back. And when you're actually sending an internationalized email address, there are actually, after the initial hello, hello interface, you actually have to send a mail from command, and actually if it's a mail from command is from an email address which is in a local language, you actually tag that with an SMTP UTF-8 flag. And basically that is telling the receiving mail server that this email address being received is in an internationalized email address and not a regular ASCII email address. And we were checking whether we got a response back from the receiving mail server that it has acknowledged the SMTP UTF-8 flag and is therefore ready to receive an email address in a local language, or email from an email address in a local language. And interestingly, what we found out was that of all the mail servers we pinged at the different IP addresses, only 1.45% of the IP addresses responded with the right response, meaning that they were able to receive an email. These email servers were able to receive an email from an internationalized email address. Rest would just fail, meaning that if I have a Hindi email address, it would just bounce back. And that's very unfortunate. And that's a very significant problem, because if you currently have an Hindi email address or a Chinese email address, it shows that more than 98% of the mail servers out there are not ready to receive your email. Or IP addresses, mail servers behind so many IP addresses, more than 98% IP addresses. And we also looked at this data and actually tried to map it on the different geographies. And in the table below, I'm listing some data which we have from different geographies, and also, India is one of them. And if you'll see that for India, we found a total of 26 or around 27,000 IP addresses for these mail servers. And only about 1,200 of them responded positively against an mail from command with the email address totally in a local language like Hindi or Chinese. So that's the extent of the problem. So we need to go and fix all these mail servers out there, or raise awareness so that these mail administrators who are managing these mail servers, they need to upgrade their systems so that these local language mails can actually go across. Next slide, please. So I've actually given sort of an example or some numbers against some of these issues which we are facing. And when we go and start analyzing it, we find out that the problem is not just with mail server or with the, the problem can actually percolate through multiple layers of technology. So if a website is not working, it may not mean that there's a problem with the website. It may actually be a problem with for example, the content management system like WordPress, which is actually being used to develop the website. So actually the problem could be one layer deeper, or it could be even deeper, that it's not really WordPress which has a problem, but maybe it is the the programming language in which WordPress is written, which is actually problematic. So it's PHP or some of the other languages which are actually have an issue. So to solve the problem, you obviously need to understand the problem first. And one of the things we've been doing through UA Steering Group, or USG, is to look at all these different layers of technology and try to figure out which layers have what levels of problems. And we obviously do a lot of these gap analyses and publish studies which are available at usg.tech website of Universal Acceptance Steering Group. Next slide, please. And similarly to technology, we also have we also look at the email ecosystem. And even though we talk about mail servers as mail servers, but when we were really talking about looking at technology, it's not really a unique single point of failure or a single application. When we talk about mail servers, it is actually a combination of user agents and submission agents, transfer agents, delivery agents. There are also spam filters and many other much more technology around mail systems, which actually needs to be obviously addressed and fixed for mails to work. And if any single piece in this whole cycle, starting from user agent on one side through MSA, MTA, and then MDA and back to MUA, even if there is a single point where technology is not geared up to address or accept internationalized email addresses, it will fail and bounce back the email address, email sent across. So you have to be very careful that the complete chain, and not on your end, but also from the sender's end, but also on the receiver's end, the complete chain of software is actually in place and supports universal acceptance. And so it's not an easy problem to fix, because it's just not my problem to fix, right? I can fix my system and my email is still not going to work because somebody else's system is not supporting it. So we have to solve this problem together collectively. Everybody has to update their system for this to work out. Next slide, please. So I will continue, but these slides will be available to you. We actually have developed a list of functional email addresses in many different languages and scripts. You could actually go to this file, choose an email address. These are all functional email addresses, as I shared. You can send an email from your own mail server to any of these email addresses, and you should get an auto response back. And if you do not get an auto response back, what that means is that somehow the mail server you are using is not being able to process internationalized email addresses. So you can check your own email server by using one of these addresses. And then if you find a problem, then you should obviously try to report it and fix it. But I guess we can probably move on and look at now how, what is the role of a country code top level domain manager in addressing this whole issue. Next slide, please. So what we did was recently collaborated with the Asia Pacific Top Level Domain Association, or APTLD for short. After a series of trainings, we actually organized a panel where we invited the different CCTLD operators, managers, including from Armenia, China, India, Iran, Russia, and Thailand. And we actually had a panel where these managers who are experienced in local language computing and technology from a perspective of domain names and email addresses, they shared their experiences and their intentions on their programs. And based on that, what we developed was actually a white paper, which was published by APTLD. And it's linked from here. It's available through APTLD website. And the next few slides, I'm actually just going to present a summary of what was published in this white paper. Again, information coming from the ccTLD managers from these countries. So when we are really looking at this from a perspective of a ccTLD manager, we really you can visualize this as in 3 layers. You can look at it from the ccTLD manager itself. So ccTLD as an organization needs to be UA ready. ccTLD then really needs to work with its partners to make sure that not only the organization is UA ready, but all its partners are UA ready. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about it in next few slides. And then eventually, obviously, the whole ecosystem needs to be UA ready. So this is something which can actually be looked at it in at least 3 different high-level layers. And we'll look at these layers slightly separately, so that we know what the ccTLD may want to do, what their partners need to do, and then what the larger ecosystem, of course, would need to do. Next slide, please. So when we are looking at it from a perspective of ccTLD, a ccTLD actually has multiple systems. Some of these are customer facing or front end systems, and then some of them are back end systems. And so ccTLD is not really a one single holistic system. It is actually a combination of multiple systems sort of working together. Similarly, so a registry or a ccTLD would actually be working with its partners or collaborators which are supporting the ccTLD's business. And normally they are basically the ccTLD registrars or resellers. Different countries have different models. Some of them allow directly, some of them directly interact with the end user or registrants, whereas some ccTLD operators would have registrars or resellers or a combination of both to do the registrations and support end users and registrants. So in a general normal case, you would ccTLD will have multiple registrars and resellers which will have their own systems. And then those systems will be interfacing with the registry systems or ccTLD manager operator systems. And then the customers will, in some cases, use the ccTLD operator systems directly, and in some cases use their partner systems. So that's how the whole thing is structured. And we'll look at how for the end users to be able to use or interact with this technology basically all the different components, of course, in this within registries and registrars and resellers, of course, need to be UA ready as a first step. So we are now looking inside ccTLD manager as well as the ccTLD managers partners. Next slide, please. So for ccTLD managers, of course, one of the first things a ccTLD manager would need to do, or a ccTLD operator would need to do, is to make their own systems UA ready. Of course, everything technology eventually is driven by the governing policy and strategy. So one of the first things which needs to be reviewed and updated is the basically the policy and strategy documents of the ccTLD organization. Obviously, I think the policy and strategy should be very clear that email addresses and domain names in all different local languages must be supported. So when we talk about policy and strategy, again, there is that internal policy for the ccTLD manager. but there is also these contracts with the CCTLD manager may sign with registrars and resellers and other partners. And therefore, in some cases, those contracts need to be updated as well. Because if you're receiving, your registrars are doing registrations on your behalf, and the registrar systems do not support local language domain names or email addresses, then that obviously creates a issue because it's sort of not allowing that data to come to your systems, even if your systems are UA ready. And then, of course, if for your contracts with them, if you ask them to be UA ready, it means their own policies would need to be updated for them to be UA ready as well. So your own policy and the policy of your partners, they all need to be updated to ensure that the UA, the UA readiness is supported. Once the policies obviously in place, I guess one of the other things which needs to come in line is that the staff, the team which is working with the CCTLD manager and its partners, they also need to be, I guess, trained to handle universal acceptance practices, understand the technical needs, technical solutions, and even possibly, as we'll see further, see if they should be able to practice it as well themselves. In addition to training staff and improving policy, of course, the technical systems need to be reviewed and updated. That obviously is done through testing and updating these systems one at a time. Next slide, please. Basically, as you progress, when you start with identifying your system, or which have to be UA ready. Once the systems have been identified, you actually would need to go and test each of those systems to find out which of those are UA ready and which of those are not. Those systems which are not UA ready, then you would need to obviously prioritize them to see which of those will need to be upgraded first and which of them need to be upgraded later. So for example, front end or front facing or customer facing systems may be given maybe slightly higher priority over, for example, backend systems, depending on what kind of systems you're talking about. So that is some of the decision making you as a CCTLD manager would need to do. Once you have a prioritized solution that, these are the 10 systems, these 3 are already UA ready, we don't need to worry about them, these 7 we need to fix. And of these 7, these are the top, these 2 are the ones we really need to fix first. Then you need to really identify how those need to be fixed, determine the solutions to provide, make them UA ready, and then, of course, go and fix them so that they are able to support all the different kinds of domain names and email addresses. And once they are fixed, then you need to make sure that they are available for interfacing with your partner systems and for use of by their customers and so on. So there's obviously a mechanism which you would need to go through to make your own systems UA ready, which requires identification of your systems and testing and prioritization of your systems before you can actually fix them. Next slide, please. So there were actually quite a few different kinds of systems which were identified by the people who were in that panel in the APTLD session. They were basically categorized into 2 parts, the front-end systems and the back-end systems. And here are some examples of some of the front-end systems and back-end systems. And of course, as a CCTLD manager yourself and your partners, you may not have all these systems deployed, right? You may have some of them, but there are obviously multiple different ways this can be done. But of course, at least some of these will be relevant for you as well. So when you're looking at these front-end systems, some examples are domain name registration front-end system. This is, for example, sometimes used by registrars. This is the interface they make available to people who are coming in and registering domain names. So, for example, when you're registering a domain name, you're sometimes asked, you're asked your name, your email address, your phone number, your contact information, billing information. And if that interface, for example, does not accept email addresses in Hindi or Tamil or Malayalam, in local languages, it means that your front-end system is not UA ready, and it is not allowing you to register unless you actually have a English email address or an ASCII email address. Your communication systems, including your corporate email servers, your ticketing systems, your websites, and any additional services you have inside your systems, they all need to be UA ready. Otherwise, you will obviously not be able to communicate in local languages. Your marketing and sales web pages need to be UA ready. Your customer accounts and profile systems which store customer information need to be UA ready, because customer information, including their URLs and email addresses, can be in local languages. Your registration data systems need to be in be UA ready, meaning many of the ccTLDs, for example, have this whois system, where you can actually go and query about who owns a particular domain name. Whois system has been generally or traditionally ASCII based. That actually has now been replaced by RDAP, which is a new protocol and RDAP does support Unicode and internationalization. So for example, if you are offering a whois service, that needs to be upgraded to RDAP, and RDAP needs to be configured properly so that you can actually store local data in local languages. And then, of course, many organizations have complaint and feedback forms, help desk functions. So any of those, these are all front-end systems. They all, whichever you are deploying needs to be UA ready, meaning it should be able to handle local language domain names and email addresses. Next slide, please. Similarly, we have backend systems. Backend systems, an example of a backend system is the main registry zone database and the system around it. They should be able to support domain names and email addresses in local languages and scripts. So, for example, the NS record entry or MX record entry, these are server addresses, and they are basically domain names, and those domain names actually could be in local languages. The EPP, which is the interface in case you actually use it. There are many ccTLD managers which may actually not use it, but this is a standard interface which is used between registries and registrars to exchange information, registration data information, and registration information. And if you're using that, that also needs to be UA ready. There are also many communication systems or other interfaces between applications within your registry systems, or between registry systems and registrar systems and reseller systems. So many of those, any of those which is exchanging data around domain names and email addresses would need to be updated to make sure that all the different categories of email addresses and domain names are supported. So those are actually some of the examples of multiple systems which would need to be evaluated, tested, and then prioritized and fixed. Next slide, please. So I guess the question is, what do you test, or how do you test? And Universal Acceptance Steering Group actually has been doing some work in it, and it actually has some useful documents on how you should test your systems for universal acceptance. One such document actually defines the testing framework. It's called UA Readiness Framework, USG 026. There's a link there. It can be used for registry systems, but it is actually a generic document which can be used to test any software or website which anybody is developing. It actually identifies acceptance tests, validation tests, processing tests, storage tests, and display tests, and specifies what kind of tests should be performed. And then we also have a USG 004 document, which actually provides test data in form of the different types of domain names and email addresses. All of them are functional. So you can use the test data and the testing framework to actually test your systems to identify whether there are any UA issues or not. And where you find those UA issues, you can eventually fix them. We've also, at the usg.tech website, published an ICANN case study, which looks at basically how ICANN has gone through this journey in fixing its systems. ICANN has more than about 100 systems or so, and we've actually went through and prioritized them and fixed them one at a time. And there's a whole strategy discussed in this case study in case you want to take a look. Next slide, please. So there is, once the systems are, or as the systems are being fixed, there is a need to train staff on technical issues around UA and how to deal with them, not only for their own use, but also technical issues which may be faced by customers, and how to actually support your customers around it. In some cases, there were some ccTLDs which shared that what they did was they actually provided their own staff with email addresses in local languages and asked them to use them so that they actually get a real feeling of how these work and what are some of the challenges. And that is obviously a very good way of making the staff realize how to eventually support your customers, because you then undergo the same experience as your customer does. So yes, there are significant training requirements which should be in place and addressed for your staff as you prepare for UA readiness. Next slide, please. Beyond fixing systems of your own, training your own staff, and working with your partners to make their systems UA ready, there is a broader role of ccTLD managers, which ccTLD managers around the globe are playing to make their ecosystem UA ready. As we talked about, there are all these websites out there, there are all these software applications out there which are not UA ready. And ccTLD manager can lead by example, but then also ccTLD managers are creating awareness across in their local communities, to technical community, to academia, training them, and eventually asking them to get involved to make their own systems UA ready, so that the entire ecosystem starts working. So I see that we're running out of time, so let me just move ahead. Next slide, please. And then obviously, I think eventually a lot of businesses would change their practices when there's great demand, and major demand also. The public sector is one of the sectors which creates a lot of demand. So if the public sector starts asking for support for domain names to serve its own citizens in local languages, suddenly the businesses also start reacting. So I think in many cases, ccTLD managers are also working with the public sector to help with developing procurement policies which require software, websites, applications to be UA ready. And that helps drive the demand and create the whole ecosystem UA ready. Next slide, please. And then, of course, you have a not only a local role to play, but also regional and global role as you embark on a UA journey. I think there are other organizations around the globe which are trying to do the same. So it is very valuable to share experiences, learn from others, share what you have achieved with others, so that we can actually address this problem, not just locally, but also regionally and globally. Next slide, please. So as was shared by Dr. Data in the beginning, there is a lot of resource which is available at uasg.tech website. Please visit it and see the different documents which are available. We also have trainings which are available. There's a training wiki page. If you have any queries, you can directly reach out to us at uaprogram@icon.org, also at info@uasg.tech. You can follow us on our social media. If you go to the website, there are multiple documents there, not just these, but I've listed some, but there are many, many more documents there to help you start on your UA journey. And let me stop here. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share this with you, and happy to take any questions. I think we're still gone a little over time. Sorry about that, but back to you, Anil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarmad. It was an engrossing 1 hour for all of us. I think we were not able to shift our eyes and ears from what you were speaking. It was such a wonderful presentation and discussion. And even if people were not aware about what is universal acceptance and whatnot, I think they have understood this. And even people who are working on universal acceptance, they're able to get inside what is required to be done. I have seen my manager, Rajiv, putting the notes on each and every line what Sarmad was talking. So thank you very much, Sarmad. But before we wrap up, I request the audience, in case you have any question, please raise your hand, put your name and organization which you belong, and then we can direct this question to Sarmad. Or in case you have any question for Dr. Ajay Data, who is chair of USSG, also UASG, I think I may expect that Dr. Ajay Data may also be ready to take that questions. Over to the audience, please. I don't think that, I think it was so beautifully designed lecture that there is one question from Vineet. Question to Ajay and Sarmad both. Can you please display what is the question? Yeah, Vineet, you can go ahead. Vineet, you can go ahead with your query. Vineet, are you not able to speak? And if you are not able to speak, please put your question on the chat box. When we talk about UA ready email service, would it be the registry role to make sure or the registrars to make necessary arrangements? So I personally feel that let Sarmad answer this query.
Thank you, Anil. Of course, UA ready email, Dr. Data is the expert here. But very quickly, before I hand it over to Dr. Data, when we're talking about email services, it's the registries and registrars are just responsible for registering domain names, not providing email service. Email service is eventually provided by third parties, businesses. We are familiar with for example, Googles and Yahoos of the world. So eventually the email service provider need to be UA ready. And let me stop here and maybe hand the floor to Dr. Data.
Thank you, Samad. Actually, you said it right, but there is a small role of registries and registrars. While a domain is being registered, could I use my email address in Hindi as a registrant detail? And could a registry or a registrar could communicate that email address for domain related information? Obviously, that will depend on registry and registrar. But I guess the question is more simpler related to the email. Email service provider is supposed to take care of your requirement, Vineet. It could be anybody who is providing you the email service. If it is Gmail, if it is XGen, if it is registrar himself, like GoDaddy, for example, or somebody in India, then you have to talk to them and they will provide the EINs. Thank you.
Right. I hope, Vineet, this answer your query. We'll take up the second question. Second is from Anurag Vinay Agarwal. He is a research scholar with IIT Roorkee. This is not a question. In fact, this is an offer to Dr. Ajay Data. He wants to get associated with UASG activities.
Thank you very much for your. Thank you very much, sir.
Anurag, your email to them.
Anurag, thank you very much. Please visit uasg.tech website right now, and there is a subscription link. Please subscribe to the mailing list and you'll be part of our community very soon. There is no problem in that. You can immediately become part of us.
Okay, next question is from Rahul Kumar. He says, which CCTLD operators are currently working on implementing UA? Dr. Ajay Data.
So there are many, including Nixi. There are many who are implementing. To my knowledge, very few are fully UA compliant from that perspective, but everybody is on the way, as I'm saying, because it requires a lot of support, not only from the registry, but lots of stakeholders into the system of registry, as it's a federated structure. So people are working on it, but I think I am not sure if any registry is fully UA ready from the perspective which I just said, the domain names also accepting the EI addresses while registering. That part I have not tested and checked from anybody, but I think people are working. I have been hearing this, that registries are working towards that direction. Thank you.
Then another question, I think Sarmad has also given a URL where people can visit and find out about the current status of the registry. There is a question from Vishwaraj. Is this an immediate implementation or do we need to wait till you develop a policy?
No, you need not to wait. If you are talking about, because it's a broader question, so I'm assuming, let us say you have a website or you have a mobile app, you can definitely make them UA ready immediately. If you are a registrar, then you have to talk to the registry software for sure. Without that, it cannot be UA ready software because you are dependent on registry. So if you are running an independent email service or your independent software, you can be very much UA ready. And there are many websites which are UA ready in the world. Thank you.
Okay, I think there is no further question on this, and it is a really, I want to take permission from Sarmad. Sarmad, I think we are having around 125 who have logged in. And there are multiple people, like in my room where I'm sitting, there are 5-6 people. So I think around 150 to 170 people must have listened to the webinar, which is addressed by you. And I'm taking your permission. In case you agree, then I want to put up on YouTube so that more number of people can get benefited out of this. And because the goal of all of us is to implement UA in a true sense and involve more and more people in using internet as a technology to everyone. Now there is a question from Selva. Do we have any data about UA acceptance from end customer perspective? Dr. Ajay Data.
So the data shared is from the website perspective. Obviously, it will be very difficult for UASG to know how much customer, let us say Netflix will have in India or Nixi will have in India. We will not go that far. What we will go is that Nixi is UA ready, or Netflix is UA ready, or IRCTC is UA ready. That is what we worry about, not about, because the moment they are UA ready, their entire customer base is also UA ready services accepted by them. And that's the key here, that we enable the organizations, and we also create awareness for the users to adopt the email addresses and the domain names.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay Data. I think with this, we will not take any further question. My request was from Sarmad to take permission to use this webinar on YouTube of Nixi, so that more and more people should be able to use it.
Of course, certainly. Anilji.
So nice of you. It was a wonderful seminar. And now we have another organization which is working relentlessly on implementing the language-based digitization process in the country. And they are also working with ICANN and IGF, Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relation. We have a very senior scholar from this organization, ICRIA, Mr. Gangesh Verma. May I request Mr. Gangesh Verma to propose vote of thanks? Gangesh is not able to access it, right? Can you make it? Is it possible? Because use him as panelist. Huh? Gangesh.
Hi,
Gangesh, yeah, you are on. Please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you very much, Sarmat, for sharing this detailed presentation with us. And I mean, as a person who's been seeing the progress on UA-related discussions for the past few years and seeing how the community engagement has grown, I think this is an invaluable resource and a learning experience for all of us. And like the CEO Nixi was mentioning, that it's for people who have just entered the space and for people who have been in the space for a while. So thank you very much for sharing with us the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Data. Thank you, Sarika, for joining in and adding to this list of resources and engagements on UA-related subjects. And I'd also like to thank Nixi, Mr. Anil Jain, and everybody on the team for inviting us and the audiences and everybody who has participated today to share their experiences and learn from this session. So thank you very much once again. And we deeply appreciate this engagement, and we look forward to more engagements in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gangesh. And I wish that all of us who are here today and who will listen this particular webinar on YouTube should contribute equally, so that not only India, but the entire world should be able to utilize the beautiful technology internet and all related applications on internet by implementing the universal acceptance. Thank you very much, Sarmat, for sparing your time from a very busy schedule. I know very well how the international organizations are poised and what timing, schedule, and commitment you people have. And you have not only spoken right now, but I think you must have spent good amount of time in preparing this particular slide. Thank you very much, Sarmat, for joining us and sharing all your knowledge on universal acceptance with all of us. Thank you very much.